Now you talk about terror. What about for me? I've been terrorized all my day. I'm all my day.
The nature of the forest itself, which I think, as you write, was kind of is the trees don't grow because it's designed or it's expected to burn. But before we get into what happened, just lay out the antecedents.
And so radiant heat, a really quick science lesson here. Radiant heat is the heat coming off the fire. It's the heat that tells you not to touch the candle or put your hand in the fire. The heat that day coming toward Fort McMurray out of this wildfire was about 950 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's hotter than Venus.
And let's talk about the natural cycle within the ecological system. You're right. One of the reasons the trees never get very big or very old is because, in spite of all that water, they burn down on a regular basis. They're designed to.
Yeah, so the boreal forest system, we don't think about it too much because it's so far north. It's very sparsely inhabited up there. So enormous fires are natural. When Canada talks about its petroleum industry, we think of oil wells and drilling rigs and things like that. And we really have to just forget all that. And what it's closer to is a massive coal mining project. And so bituminous sand it's literally sand soaked in bitumen, which is basically tar. And no ordinary person would ever imagine extracting oil from that. But
you read in the book that it's only 10% bitumen.
Yeah. So it's about 90% or 85% sand, quartzite sand, which is a really hard mineral, 5% water, bits of clay, and then this tiny percentage of actual bitumen, which has to be dug up with giant machines. And when I say giant machines, I'm talking about cranes and shovels that are, have scoops about the size of a garage. And the trucks that they then fill with this material weigh 400 tons empty, so that the trucks themselves are the size of 3-story houses. The wheels are 13 feet tall. Everything is kind of steroidally large. And it's because the landscape itself is so vast, it's very hard to even find a scale for it until you stand a person next to it, and people just disappear in that environment. So you have these massive shovels digging up this bituminous sand, which grows under the boreal forest. So before you can even dig anything, you have these even larger bulldozers that just plow the forest up into heaps. And then the shovels come in, the trucks, are driving, across this blackened landscape, and they come to these upgrading facilities where they basically heat up this bituminous sand and melt the tar out of it. So this is, again, the goal here is to make a petroleum product, but they literally squander, in my view, billions of cubic feet of natural gas every day just to melt the bitumen out of the sand. And all you have after you've burnt all that natural gas are vats full of tar, which is essentially driveway sealant. And so then to actually render it into something like petroleum, you have to heat it again in these pressurized tanks. And that takes more natural gas and produces extraordinary amounts of pollution. And then, in the petroleum industry, you're fractionating usable elements of whatever petroleum product you're trying to render. And here they get this oil-like substance that then has to be piped or trucked south to American refineries that can handle heavy, dirty oil. And then it needs to be heated again. So when you think of the amount of fossil fuel that is used simply to get this to the factory where it can be turned into something resembling oil. It's called synthetic crude. It is cheap and abundant, but extraordinarily wasteful.
You have this amazing story from, is it the Chisholm Fire in 1950? So I'll let you tell it. I mean, so NASA or NORAD or somebody is monitoring global weather from a satellite feed, but you can pick it up from there.
Yeah. This was in 2001, and just about 100 miles or so south of Fort McMurray, again in the boreal forest. But this fire ignited under similarly hot, dry conditions. And I think it was a Navy satellite observer in DC, and he saw this aerosol injection, this giant smoke plume erupting out of the forest of Alberta. And he knew there are no volcanoes there. So what else could send up a jet of smoke like that with that much ferocity and energy into the stratosphere? And the only other thing he could think of that could do that is a nuke. And so they literally inquired to the authorities in Alberta, have you just detonated a nuclear device? And they said, no, we haven't. And when the fellow in DC, identified the zone on the map where this was happening, that was the Chisholm Fire, which has gone down in the record books as the most energetic, intense, and ferocious wildfire ever measured on Earth. And it's got a lot of competition, not just from Alberta, but from California, from Australia, and even Siberia. So it was an extraordinary event. But it was, in a way, a bellwether for what was to come. And Alberta has produced some of the most intense fires ever measured since then.
In the book, you ask us to look at fires from a different perspective. And at the top of chapter 12, you quote Ray Rasker, the co-founder of Community Planning Assistance for Wildfire. And he says, we don't have a forest fire problem. We have a home ignition problem. As soon as you come to that realization, it changes your view on wildfire. That was John Valiant, author of Fire Weather, A True Story from a Hotter World. I want to thank the Real News Network and its production team, Cameron Granadino, Adam Coley, David Hebden, and Kayla Rivera. You can find me at chrishedges.substack.com.
Thank you so much for watching the Real News Network, where we lift up the voices, stories, and struggles that you care about most. And we need your help to keep doing this work. So please tap your screen now, subscribe, and donate to the Real News Network. Solidarity.